I'm Elizabeth Lynch, a graduate student here at West Virginia University, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Life at the Land Grant, a Davis College podcast. The Davis College envisions a world sustainably fed, clothed, and sheltered. This podcast aims to highlight outstanding faculty, staff, students, and alumni that are opening doors to new opportunities and making an impact in our mountain state and beyond. So without further ado, let's bring on our next guest and learn more about their life at the land grant. For our next guest on this episode, I'm super excited to talk with her. We've got Dr. Amy Welsh, who is our program coordinator and professor of wildlife and fisheries resources at Davis College. How are you today, Dr. Welsh?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and then sharing your story with us. My professor, I've got my major advisor, Dr. Moritz, and he talks about you all the time. He absolutely loves you, loves your work. So I'm excited to learn more about you.
Wonderful.
In your own words, you've said that your path to WVU, your path to the Mountain State, has been a very winding path. And you've been here since 2011. Can you give us some insight to that path that you've taken to get here?
Sure, absolutely. So I have gone several different routes to get here. So I have really broad interests. So when I look back to my undergraduate experience, if somebody had told me then that I would be working in genetics of fish and wildlife, I would have told them they were crazy. First of all, I didn't even know that was an area you could go into. I was a zoology major in undergrad, and we had to take a regular genetics course. And so I associated genetics with fruit flies and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So there was no way I would have thought I'd have gone this career. So my undergraduate degree was in zoology and psychology. So even when I graduated from undergrad, didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up then working for the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research doing sleep deprivation research. Wow. So kind of combining biology with psychology. Did that for a while. Realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. I was influenced by movies and Silence of the Lambs in particular. So I decided, I want to do forensics. Yeah. So then that's one route my winding path took. So then I ended up getting my master's degree in forensic science. And I originally went in there thinking I was going to go into forensic psychology or something like that, and realized, well, if I want a job in forensics, I probably need to learn this genetics thing, because that's where the bulk of the jobs were. So while I was getting my master's, I ended up doing an internship at the National Fish and Wildlife Forensics Lab out in Ashland, Oregon. That was my first exposure to the field of conservation genetics. Didn't even know that that was something that you could do, using genetics to help conserve fish and wildlife species. So after I got my that was also my first introduction to the field of genetics and the lab work. And then I realized how cool genetics could be, using it for applications. It's not just fruit flies. You can actually use it to answer cool questions that are difficult to answer otherwise in the field. So after I got my master's there, I worked for a while in human forensics, using genetics to identify soldiers from the Korean War, Vietnam War, World War II. So missing soldiers in action. Worked there for about 3 years and decided forensics is not what I wanted to do. It can get a little depressing. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, how can I use my genetic skills that I've now acquired to do something that I'm more interested in? And that's when I first discovered the field of conservation genetics. So now my winding path took me to get my Ph.D., and I went to UC Davis to get my Ph.D. in ecology, working on lake sturgeon. And I didn't think I was going to like fish, but even if you don't like fish, sturgeon are a pretty cool fish species. So that sold me on fish. And after doing my Ph.D., then I went up to upstate New York, and I was a professor there for a little while at SUNY-Oswego for 5 years. Realized I love teaching, but I also love more like doing research. So I wanted something that was a better balance between research and teaching. Then this position came open at WVU for a conservation geneticist, which is pretty rare. It's such a niche field that oftentimes they're not advertising for faculty positions in that particular niche field. So I was super excited about that. It brought me closer to home to my family because I'm originally from Maryland. And so then my winding path brought me here, and I've been here since then.
I'm one of those people who firmly believes that everything happens for a reason. And,
Yeah.
those different parts of your life really help build you and create you into who you are today.
So true, Elizabeth. So true.
Do you
It's part of the
find,
journey. The journey is just as important as the end result.
absolutely, do you find that you use some of the skills that you built on, some of the skills that you learned during your forensics career today?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that our lab has done is wildlife forensic cases. So, and that's where, yeah, it totally melded the two. So I was exposed a little bit to wildlife forensics when I did that internship in Oregon. And when I came here to West Virginia, there was a real need in the state and in the region for wildlife forensics cases. And because you have the federal lab out in Oregon, but they're doing the big things like endangered species, those kind of things. Our human forensics labs don't have the tools to handle wildlife forensic cases. So there's a real need in the region for wildlife forensics labs. There's not many of them. So we've done most of the cases that we've worked on in our lab are deer poaching cases.
Wow.
And the other common thing that we get are bear attacks.
Holy cow. I didn't know that this was a thing. I kind of want to go on a tangent with this right
Oh,
now.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I guess how often do you help with this, the forensic wildlife work? I didn't know
So
that this was a thing.
we used to do, I would say, anywhere from 3 to 5 cases a year. I haven't
Wow.
done them in recent years just because we don't have the people resources. We're so busy with our own projects that we don't really have, because the turnaround time on these are so quick. So I
Mhm.
haven't done it in about the last year, but prior to that, we were doing about 3 to 5 cases a year.
And that's a partnership with the West Virginia Department of Ag or the Department of
So
Natural
it's most
Resources?
of our cases come from West Virginia Division of Natural Resources
Okay.
or Ohio DNR.
Wow.
Yeah. So Ohio doesn't have a lab resource. So one of our biggest cases came from Ohio, where they had about 18 deer heads that they had confiscated. And that case ended up actually going to court, and the people got prosecuted and got some jail time. And we had one of my students ended up having to testify in a court case one time. So yeah, it gets, and that was unusual because usually wildlife forensic cases, once they hear the DNA evidence, they don't even usually go to court, but that one did. And so it's pretty exciting when we get those.
But it's really neat to think about how one topic that typically people think is very secluded, so natural resources, it's
Yeah.
just working in forestry or just working with fisheries. It's very secluded or simple. It branches out and reaches so many
So many.
different things.
Oh, absolutely, Elizabeth. And that's what I love about our curriculum in our program is that you start off, with that intro, you learn, but then you take classes and all these different subdisciplines. And I can't tell you how many students I encounter that are like, didn't even know that field existed, and they learn about different areas that they didn't even know were associated with natural resources. This works perfectly for me because I can still contribute to the field of natural resources, but I don't have to be outside all the time. It's a way that I can, and sometimes people will figure out, well, I like going outside and I like doing field work, but as you get older, you may not like it as much. And so there are lots of opportunities where you can contribute to the field of natural resources and not have to, and do a variety of different types of things.
That's amazing. This makes me so excited. And
Oh,
for
good.
you specifically, what made zoology and ecology really stick out to you? You're so multidisciplinary with your work, but what made those two things really just, I guess, stand out and make you decide to follow that path?
Yeah. So I've always been passionate about animals, wildlife, conservation. I remember when I was in high school and they had us create a book of how you saw your future and, you had to project out your life. And I think even then in my little book, it said that I was going to be working in a zoo. So I was always super passionate about animals and the issues of conservation, which is interesting because I did not grow up in the outdoors. I grew up in suburban Baltimore. My parents were not outdoor people. I didn't grow up hunting or fishing. So I'm not sure why I was so attracted to, I'm definitely attracted to the conservation side of things. And, but I've always, as a kid, was always interested in environmental and conservation issues. And so that had always appealed to me. So even as I took that winding path, and did different things. It just, the more I kept an open mind, I realized I don't have to give up genetics. Like here, I thought, I learned genetics because it was just an opportunity there, but that's something I could meld back with my initial passion of conservation. And I was getting down with forensics because it is depressing when you're dealing with dead things all the time, dead people, dead crimes, and all that stuff. And I thought, well, this is a more positive approach where I could use my genetics to make a positive impact in terms of trying to help resources out there, trying to help our species before they go extinct.
Absolutely. And, you've had that idea in the back of your head and it was always just kind of settling and sitting there. But now you have this beautiful marriage of conservation, of genetics, of ecology. And your research right now focuses primarily on conservation genetics and conservation ecology. So for somebody
I found my niche.
Exactly. So for somebody who doesn't quite understand what that means, can you explain that in lay terms?
Absolutely. So, basically, it's founded on the field of genetics. So, but it's founded on the field of what we call population genetics. So, how we observe genetic changes in populations due to, and in the world of conservation, we're looking at how do things like habitat fragmentation, when you start creating these small isolated populations, what happens to their genetic diversity? So, what happens, I'll tell you, is that they lose genetic diversity. And when they do that, they're not able to adapt to environmental changes. They're not able to keep up with climate change, other diseases that may come into their population. So that's what the field of conservation genetics is doing. It's monitoring those genetic changes in populations, looking at how human impacts influence those genetic changes. We use genetics to screen individuals that we're breeding together in captivity to make sure that we're not mating related individuals and that you can screen for particular genes that might be beneficial to life in the wild. So it's taking all those concepts that we use in the human field and in agriculture and applying them to fish and wildlife populations out in the wild as well as in captivity. And although I focus on fish and wildlife, there's people that focus on plant genetics of wild and natural plant populations. So the genetics is commonly used in the human and agriculture field, and it just started really being used in the conservation field in the 1980s. So I always tell students when I teach, everybody in our major has to take my conservation genetics class. And I always tell them, you're going to encounter this at some point in your career, because at some point you're going to get to a question you want to answer and your field techniques are not going to be able to answer it. And that's where genetics can come in and provide that extra information. So we're looking at how genes are inherited. The future of genetics and conservation is really exciting because there are some labs there that are working on de-extinction, cloning extinct animals and bringing them back from the wild. So that can be pretty controversial, but this is the future direction of genetics, or genetically modifying organisms so that they can be better adapted to changes and challenges they may experience in future environments. So using all those genetic techniques that we hear about in the news related to humans and agriculture, but applying them to our natural fish and wildlife populations.
How do you feel about that in terms of the future of genetics? What is your thought on combining GMOs or cloning with conservation ecology?
So my gut, it makes me a little nervous, okay. So I feel you get that Frankenstein feeling in your gut, like, what are we creating? What happens what are the consequences that we can't predict? So that makes me a little bit nervous. How are we going to get back from it if we start releasing these genetically modified endangered species, or we are all of a sudden cloned a woolly mammoth? Like, what are the consequences that we're not predicting? So genetic consequences on the ecosystem. Can we support a woolly mammoth? They've made a lot of progress with the passenger pigeon, but we don't have the same ecosystem that the passenger pigeon had when it was alive. So all those things that we're not thinking about. Yeah, it's a really cool genetic technique. It's really exciting and fun to talk about, but what are the consequences that we're not predicting? And my feelings are, well, can't those resources that we're using to bring back extinct animals, probably those resources should be used to prevent extinction. And so
Right.
that's taking away, a lot of these are privately funded, so we're not using government funding for it, but still, if those people were dedicating those resources to preserving our species before they go extinct, in my mind, that would be a better use of those resources. Even though as a geneticist, I'm like, oh, that is really cool that we can do this. Some of the more benign ones that I think are really cool is they've done cloning of a species called Przewalski's horse, which is pretty much just in captivity. And what happened is because the population of the Przewalski's horse got so small, it lost a lot of genetic diversity. You only have the genetic diversity that you have. So what they ended up doing is they ended up cloning a stallion that died in the 1980s, brought it back just to improve, to add additional genes to the population and improve its genetic diversity. So I think that's a better use of it when you have a population that has lost all of its genetic diversity, and the only way to get that genetic diversity back really is using individuals that have died, decades ago. So that to me is a little bit of a better use, but it's still crazy that we're there. I always used to talk about it as something far away in the future, but now the future is now. It's like we're here. Yeah.
It's crazy how scientific advancements have come along in just a short period of time. But I love getting insight into people who are experts in this field and their opinions on these controversial topics. I tell people all the time, if you're unsure about something, ask somebody who knows all about it, or go read the scientific journals. So I love getting that from people who know what's going on. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Bringing it back to you a little bit more, can you provide some examples of some of the research you're doing at WVU Davis right now? I read a little bit about, introduction of elk population in West Virginia. I read something about monitoring salamander species in the state. So you've got a lot of different projects going on. Can you give me some of those examples?
Oh, we do. Yeah, we have quite a variety, especially our current projects right now span across lots of different animals. And that's what I love about genetics. So I am not a fish person, not a wildlife person. I'm both. And I love that I get to dabble in all these different taxonomic groups and I'm not pigeonholed into one. So lots of different projects going on. So one of the hottest topics, and our team won a Recovery Champion Award for this from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is our work with the candy darter.
Wow.
So the candy darter is an endangered species here in West Virginia, and the biggest threat to the candy darter is hybridization with the introduced variegated darter. And really the only way that we can monitor that level of hybridization is through genetics. So we play an important role. Our research helped inform the listing decision for the Endangered Species Act. So that was super exciting. And now what they do is they're trying to move pure candy darter individuals into locations where the variegated darter is not. So what we do is our lab jumps in and we screen all those individuals to make sure that they are indeed genetically pure candy darters before you introduce them. And then we provide guidance in terms of who should be mating with whom in order to increase the genetic diversity of the population. So that's a project that is ongoing, and we do it as a service to the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Wow.
So we've been working on that for a long time. We have an otter project. So river otters can get a bad rap in the state because a lot of the fishing community feels that the river otters are eating their trout. So there's a human wildlife conflict situation there between the fishing community and river otters. So they want to get rid of the river otters because of that, and or control their population better. So we decided, well, let's do some research. Let's use genetics to analyze the stomach contents of river otters and see if they are indeed eating the trout. And we just have results hot off the press on that one, and they're not eating many trout. So that's good news for the river otters. They're eating a lot of sunfish and other species, and a lot of crayfish too, a lot of invertebrates. But it doesn't appear that they are gobbling up all our trout. So that's good news for the river otters. We have, as you mentioned, the West Virginia Elk Project. So we are looking at we have the elk that were reintroduced back into the state, and they use two different source populations for that introduction. So now we're evaluating, was it successful? Do we have high genetic diversity? Are the different source populations breeding with each other to improve that genetic diversity? So kind of a monitoring of success, which a lot of times when we do reintroductions, we don't do that. So it's really good to be on top of that game and get in there and do that. I still do a lot of work on lake sturgeon. So that was my first species that got me into conservation genetics. So it still holds a special place in my heart. So we've got a lake sturgeon project happening in Lake Superior in the Great Lakes, where we're using genetics to determine where they're moving when they're not breeding, and that can lead us into understanding how different impacts like fishing might impact different breeding populations. As you mentioned, we have a Cheat Mountain salamander project, another threatened species in the state that I have a student working on to look at see how landscape factors are influencing their movement across the landscape. We have bunny projects. So we've got a project on the Appalachian cottontail and snowshoe hare, looking at genetics and disease ecology of those species. And let's see, I think those are and then we've got a lot of game fish species. So we've got projects on walleye, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, looking to see where the Florida bass have been introduced into the state, or have the Alabama bass been introduced, and looking at population structure of that. We do a lot of walleye work to make sure that we're introducing the native strain of walleye as opposed to the Great Lakes strain. So we've got a huge variety of things going on in our lab. So it's definitely an exciting time to be at the Wild Genomics Lab.
Your hands are in so many different pies right now, and
it is so many, Elizabeth. Incredible. It's like, woo!
Oh my goodness. And what I think is the coolest part too is that a lot of the work that or I guess a majority of the work that you're doing is used to improve the state of West Virginia.
Yes.
And, that's something that I'm proud of being a part of West Virginia. I'm proud to be a resident. And I think it's incredible that this research you're doing here at WVU is making an impact across the Mountain State.
Oh, yes. And I have such a close working relationship with our DNR people. And it's been so wonderful because we're very fortunate to have Dr. Chris Ryan, a West Virginia DNR biologist and manager, housed right there in our building, in our program. So we have that constant interaction with our DNR folks, figuring out, what do you need? What do you need to better manage your species in the state? And how can we provide that research? And such a close and valuable connection. And that's what makes me love what I do, is because it has that direct benefit to our state, to our region. And I'm not just doing this for the fun of research, but I'm doing it because it's actually going to benefit the species and the people of the state.
And that's why I love agriculture and natural resources. All the research that we do is applied research. It can be done and made or used to make a difference immediately and make that impact that you want. And you and your students are doing that every single day. And I love that. I'm really excited to talk about that. But what I wanted to know is, what can the average West Virginian do to help in this regard? What can we do as citizens in the state to help with what you're doing?
Yeah, so there are, I'll get on my soapbox about this one. So I'm very passionate about the candy darter. It's something that the state should, is very proud of, having this species. Beautiful fish. Darter's not a huge fish, but the candy darter is called the candy darter because it's so brightly colored and it's just beautiful. And as I said, the biggest threat to candy darters in the state is the introduction of the variegated darter. We think the variegated darter got into its range by people fishing with live bait. Then when they're all done fishing, they dump that live bait in the water. And that's likely how the variegated darter got introduced. So just making people aware, preferably don't fish with live bait. If you have to fish with live bait, or you really love it fishing with live bait so much, be aware of how you're discarding it. So those, because you could, when you just dump it right back into the water, you could be introducing a species outside of its native range that could have serious impacts, which is definitely what we saw with the candy darter. So just thinking about that in terms of, I know people get frustrated when you go camping and they say, don't bring firewood from your house. And you think probably maybe the campground is just trying to to make some money off of you. But actually, it's to avoid that introduction of non-native species outside of their range. So just thinking about those things and adhering to the regulations that the DNR come up with. Not, but, being careful about what you hear in the media. So we hear, we hear that a lot, but it also applies to conservation. So as I mentioned, people get really upset about the river otters and the trout, but you really have to think, okay, let's find the right information. So, take a look at that information, educate yourself, reach out to researchers at WVU. We're happy to talk with the public, reach out to our extension agents, and then figure out, is that true? What I'm hearing in the media, is that really what's happening? Should I be concerned about that? And just kind of fact checking what you hear and using us as a resource when you don't have the right information, or you're questioning the information that you're hearing, because a lot of it is due to just misinformation. We hit that when with the candy darter, they were banning trout stocking in certain areas because of the potential effects on the candy darter. So reach out to us if you have questions. Really, just try to educate yourself and become informed. And understand that when we ask you not to do something, there's a reason for it. So if we ask you to do something, there's a reason for it. And sometimes we need to do a better job about communicating what the reason is behind that.
Right. So it's a good balance between being able to explain your science, explain your research, get that information out there, but also having that general curiosity to go and ask people, okay, this is what's going on. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time that, you're allowed to reach out to our professors. You're allowed to reach out to our extension agents. That's what they're there for. Come and reach out to grad students.
Exactly.
We love talking
We're
about
happy
this
to
stuff.
talk about this stuff. Yeah.
All right. So say that I'm an incoming student and I am listening to this podcast and I'm really excited about what you're talking about. Can you tell me some of the exciting opportunities that I could look forward to as an incoming student if I were to become a student in the Natural Resources Division? Could you give me maybe 3 of your top favorite opportunities?
Yep. Okay. So number one, you'll be outside a lot and you'll be doing hands-on stuff a lot. So most of our classes have labs associated with them. And when I say labs, most of the time you're not inside in a lab. You are outside, you're handling animals, you're learning the techniques that are going to make you marketable when you graduate and ready for a job. So you're learning all those techniques just from the classes. So lots of hands-on experience. Lots of time outside. So very hands-on, very experiential learning. And that happens every semester. So unlike some other majors where you may not be taking the meat of your classes until your junior or senior year, every semester you'll be in at least one wildlife and fisheries class. So you're immediately engaged in the major. You're immediately getting outside and learning those different techniques that are going to help get you a job. So that's number one. Number two, I like to say that WVU is a rather large university, so you get all the benefits of a large university in terms of the variety of classes that are available. We help you tailor your electives to match what your interests are. So, for example, if you want to be a game officer, then you may take some classes in forensic science to learn how to do that. So being at a large university, we have those benefits. We have those networking opportunities that you get at a large university. But our program gives you that small college family feel. Absolutely. And our undergrads have confirmed that over and over again. So you get, to me, the best of both worlds. You get that small college feel at a large university. We have a lot of different student organizations. We have active chapters of the Wildlife Society and the American Fisheries Society to help build that family feel. Very easy to get to know your faculty members. I mean, we know everybody by name. And so it's really, you get that family feel. And then the third benefit is experience, kind of add on to the experiential learning. All of our students are required to do an internship. We help you find that internship. And I cannot tell you how many times that leads to a job in the future. I can't tell you how many of my advisees say, yep, I had a great summer internship. Now they want to hire me when I graduate. Happens all the time. And it just gives you that opportunity to build your skill set and also figure out what you like and what you don't like. You may think you really like something, but then you do the internship and then you realize, oh, not for me. And that's part of the learning process as well. We do a lot of undergraduate research. So every one of our faculty love to have undergrad researchers. And you may be listening to this and thinking, I don't care about research. It is building that skill set. It's learning what's out there about the different projects. You may find you like it. It's building that relationship with the faculty, with the faculty members. So just the benefits of doing that. And there is not a single one of our faculty who doesn't love having an undergrad researcher. And the university really facilitates those undergrad research opportunities through lots of different programs. So, I mean, I think I had in my lab 5 undergrad researchers working this past semester. Some of them are doing it as volunteer experiences. Some of them are doing it in a more formal capacity. But it's an opportunity. I always tell students when they come to my lab, I'm like, I'm not offended if you want to try this out and then you hate it. I don't take it personally, but use it as an opportunity to explore something and see if you like it. And I've had students who do 1 semester in my lab and realize, nope, that's not for me. And then they go and do an undergrad research experience somewhere else in someone else's lab. So on top of the internships, it just gives you that added opportunity to really explore different things and see what you like and what you don't like.
And I think that's such an incredible thing. I wouldn't be the scientist or the person that I am without my undergraduate research opportunities provided during my bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
And I think it's, because of the excitement of the professors and, the willingness to allow people to come in and just explore, as a student, I was incredibly grateful for that. And I know so many other students are also feeling that exact same way, super appreciative of that. So that's an amazing thing. And that happens because of our professors and because of, their, like I said, their willingness to just let that happen.
Dedicated.
So I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What degrees could I obtain? I know things are shifting in the college right now, but I'm sure some of those degrees are still staying very similar.
Yep. So, and especially in the wildlife and fisheries program, it's very, our degrees have not changed under any of the processes that we're going through at the university level. So we have a bachelor's of science degree in wildlife and fisheries. So you get the bachelor's degree in wildlife and fisheries. When you finish, you are qualified for either a job in wildlife or fisheries. Now, as part of your degree, you pick an area of emphasis. And you could pick the wildlife area of emphasis or the fisheries area of emphasis. You could also do both if you wanted to. And the way that those curricula are designed, if you complete the wildlife area of emphasis, you will be eligible to be certified under the professional organization, the Wildlife Society. So you will have met all the curricular requirements necessary for certification. Same thing on the fish side. So if you do the fish area of emphasis, you've met all the certification requirements necessary to be certified by the American Fisheries Society. So again, we're creating marketable people. Our graduates are very marketable when they come out. So that's at the undergrad option. And then we also have a master's degree in Master's of Science in Wildlife and Fisheries Resources. So that's a thesis-based option. Usually takes our students about 2 years. I would say most of our graduates work before they go on for a master's degree. But that's an option. And then we also have a Ph.D. program, and the Ph.D. is in natural resources science. And all of those are advisors based. So you find a project and an advisor that's doing something that you want and see if they have an available project for you at the graduate level.
So many opportunities, whether you are undergrad or graduate level. But again, you're creating extremely marketable students who are able to leave the Davis College and get a job, which is incredible. You teach as well, and I think that's super exciting. What is your favorite class to teach?
So my favorite class, gosh, that's a tough one. So let's see. I probably, I don't know, not to sound cliche, but I probably don't have a favorite class. So
that's okay.
I teach 2. So I teach WMAN 150, which is conservation ecology. It is a class that's geared towards freshmen. So it's required of all our freshman students in the major. Some other majors in the Davis College also required as part of their curriculum, but it's also a general education course. So I have pretty large enrollment in that class. I usually have anywhere from 180 to 200 students in that class. And what I love about that class is exposing them to conservation issues. I love that I have non-majors in it. So I love that I can tell people about the issues of conservation, regardless of what major they're in. I love the perspective that those non-major students present. So I always stress that conservation is an interdisciplinary field. It involves things like anthropology, sociology, it involves economics, it involves law, it involves engineering. So just showing them that, hey, regardless of what your major is, you can have an impact on conservation. And we need all these different disciplines in order to be able to do effective conservation. So I love that. And I love that it gives our major students that perspective from different majors and seeing how it all ties in. So I do enjoy teaching that class. The other class I teach is an undergraduate conservation genetics course. So that is another one that I really enjoy teaching. So that is primarily just for our majors, mostly juniors and seniors. But I do have students that are in we have a minor, I forgot to mention that when we talked about degrees. We have a minor in conservation ecology and a minor in wildlife and fisheries resources. So I sometimes have students in the minor that are taking that, or some students that just want to take it for fun. So it's not major restricted. And I love teaching that because most of the students in there don't have a genetics course, have never had a genetics course. They don't see immediately why genetics is important. They probably don't even want to be there. They're just there because they have to for their major. So they think kind of what I thought in undergrad, like, what does genetics have to do with what I'm interested in? So I love showing them this is how genetics can be used as a tool. This is the application. So the class is very applied. We go through a lot of case scenarios. We show I try to get them to think about how they can use genetics to make management decisions. So I'm not training them to be a full-blown geneticist. What I am training them to do is when they're out in the field, I want them to be aware about how genetics can help them answer the questions they're trying to answer. When they work with that geneticist, I'm trying to get them to understand how they can apply those results to their management decisions. Or if they're reading a scientific paper about genetics, how can they take those results and apply it to management decisions? So to me, that's really fun. And I love at the end of the class when students are like, I didn't even know this could all be done. And I didn't even know I would like genetics. And sometimes they're like, can I volunteer in your lab? This is so cool. So that's always so heartwarming where it's like, yeah, see, genetics is cool. It can be fun. And so
It is great. I love seeing that light bulb go off sometimes.
yeah.
You are somebody's first introduction to wildlife and natural resources. You're somebody's first introduction to genetics. Does that scare you?
Oh, no, it doesn't scare me. I guess it excites me. It definitely excites me because I am so passionate about both of those things that I just love telling people about it, and so I'm like, yeah, it excites me. It excites me. And so, yeah, definitely doesn't scare me because I feel like it's so exciting to see them learn about the different things that they could do or the effect that they could have, even if they're not in our major, and just getting them aware of those things. So to me, it empowers when I have those opportunities and I'm that first introduction, I find it empowering. I feel like I have an obligation to really communicate things well so that they understand. So I get excited and empowered by it.
And I love that because it's because of professors like you that we have a body of students that are so excited about what they do. Sometimes it takes the spark from our professors to be like, this is great. Let me show you why it's great. And then they carry that excitement throughout everything that they do. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for exciting so many students.
Oh, my pleasure. I love it. That's one of my favorite parts of my job.
Okay. Now, what do you think is the most challenging thing about working in this field?
Okay. So probably the most challenging thing, is you'll do better in this job if you're not restricting yourself geographically. So it's not like a job like accounting or nursing where you could live anywhere, you could find a job that's related to that. You don't have to leave your hometown. There's probably some kind of job. So it's not one of those universal ubiquitous jobs that you can find anywhere. You kind of, if you really want to have the opportunities that you're probably thinking you want to have, the more open you are to moving and trying different locations, the better. Because if I want to stay in my hometown, can't guarantee a DNR position is going to open at that hometown. So you'll do a lot better if you're more open to move geographically. In the beginning, sometimes you might take term positions where it might be a 6-month field position. And so that can be sometimes frustrating for students, but it can also be an opportunity. I had a former student reach out to me much later and said, I did that approach. I did several different field positions over different terms. And I had a friend who took a more permanent job right away. And he said he was so glad he did the temporary field ones because he got such a variety of experiences, got to try out living in different places, got to see more of the country, and got to really understand what he liked and what he didn't like. So it can be a limitation of our field, but it can also be an opportunity. But I think if you go in thinking, okay, I am willing to try different geographic areas in the country, you'll probably do better and have more opportunities.
Right. So it's kind of keeping that open mind, but allowing yourself to take something that might be considered a negative and really just allow it to become that positive thing.
Yeah.
So
sometimes, we encourage our students for your internship. You can go anywhere for your internship. So you don't have to stay close by. We have people that go out west for their internships. We had a student that went to South Africa and did cheetah rehabilitation for their internship. So the sky's the limit in terms of that. And so I find that once students, if they do their internship somewhere else, sometimes they go and they're like, oh, I love Montana. And then they end up, they kind of, gets them used to being outside of the area, and then they're more willing to, and then they actually want a job out there. And so, yeah, sometimes that internship can be that gateway to getting.
Absolutely. You see that open door.
Being
sometimes
more open to it.
Right. Sometimes you see the open door and you just have to walk through it. As scary as it might be, you just have to walk through it.
Right. Exactly.
You talked about the challenges. What's the best thing about your job?
Oh, best thing. So the best thing about a career in this is you are making a difference. I mean, this is a job where you can wake up every day and you're like, what I'm doing is making an impact. And if you care about fish and wildlife, if you care about that kind of thing, then this is the job because every day on a daily basis, you are doing something that has an impact. And there's such a variety, as we noted in the beginning of this, such a variety of subdisciplines and things that you can do. So you can find your niche, you can stay broad, but whatever you're doing, you're having an impact. So this is definitely a career that has an impact.
Absolutely. Now, what advice would you want to give to somebody who is considering taking a position in the natural resources field?
Keep an open mind. So again, kind of coming full circle, we started off with my winding path. I got to where I am today because I kept an open mind. So I looked at those doors, those opportunities. When I was at a transitional phase, I didn't limit what I was looking at. I took a broad approach to looking at what opportunities were available, and kept an open mind about what I might like and what I might not like. Whatever you choose to do, you're not stuck doing that for the rest of your life. So use it. Again, it's about the journey. You're going to learn so much about yourself, so much about the field if you view it as a journey. So keep an open mind, view it as a journey, be open to different places you may not think you have wanted to live. Think about different subdisciplines you may not think that you're interested in, and keep an open mind about those opportunities and enjoy the journey. It's not always about the end result, but it's the process. Take as much joy in the process of getting there as you do in the end product.
I couldn't agree with you more. That was put beautifully. What makes my last question? Let me back up there. My last question for you is probably my favorite question.
Okay.
What makes your life at the land grant so special or so impactful?
So there are probably two elements to that. So I love the land grant mission of service. And I feel like everything that my research does involves service to the state, service to the region. The other thing I like is the student element. So the land grant institution was established to educate the public. I love the variety of students I encounter, the number of first generation students that I get to engage with. Just I love the student body that is at a land grant institution and empowering those students, giving them those opportunities to realize that you can do whatever you want. The sky's the limit, and empowering them in that way. So both those elements, the research element as well as the teaching element, and how both of those are under the service umbrella is what I love about the land grant mission.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story today with us, Dr. Welsh. And thank you for what you do for the state of West Virginia, for the students at West Virginia University, and for the impact that you're making in lives daily.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth, for thinking of me for this. Love doing this. And again, people are always welcome to reach out to any of us for information, questions. If they want to come to our program, and our undergraduate degree, come for a campus tour, see it firsthand, meet our students in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All right, guys, that is the end of today's episode. Make sure you tune in next time to see who we can talk to and learn more about their life at the land grant.